Okay, this is Attorney General Dana Nessel versus Shinnok Home Care, Inc. Et al., docket number 16-472CZ. And this is the time set for a hearing to show cause why the defendants should not be found in civil contempt for violating a permanent injunction. And could I start with getting appearances of the attorneys for the record, please?
Yes, good afternoon, Your Honor. Kelly McLean appearing on behalf of plaintiff.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Judge. Christopher Quinn appearing on behalf of defendants.
Okay, thank you. And as I said, this is a show cause hearing. There are a couple things I would like to address on the record before we start with that. One is that this was originally scheduled to be a hearing completely by Zoom, remote hearing. And it was scheduled, I believe, for June 10th. The defendants objected to using Zoom, and they also stated that they could not appear in person either, and also they requested an adjournment. I would just like to briefly address those things before we proceed. First of all, with respect to Zoom, the objection was made under MCR 2.407, subparagraph C, subparagraphs 2, 4, 6, 8, 11, and 13. Under subparagraph 2, the defendants indicated that their language and technical aptitude did not allow them to appear via Zoom. And they also indicated under subsection 4, maybe under a couple others as well, that they could only connect by phone, and that would present issues with them not being able to see witnesses or question witnesses adequately or present documents. And also they said that they could not consult with counsel during testimony if they were to appear in that fashion. So I considered all those factors and more, and I determined that video technology would not be appropriate in this case. The next issue raised is that the defendants said that they also could not appear in person for a hearing. And they said that they could not attend because of pre-existing medical conditions that made them susceptible to COVID-19. Two of the individual defendants signed a one-sentence statement describing their medical conditions. Those statements were very summary in nature. They weren't witnessed, they weren't notarized, they weren't in an affidavit form, they weren't supported with any medical verification. Had this been maybe 1 month earlier, I would have said, yeah, let's adjourn it. But at this point, this court is operating under a phase 2 reopening plan that has been approved by the Michigan Supreme Court. We are following, as you may have noticed when you came in, screening, sanitation, hygiene, mask wearing, and social distancing, and among other things, but those are the main things that we're following. The courtroom capacity is actually 30 people right now, according to what's been approved by the Michigan Supreme Court. So with all those measures in place, I'm satisfied that the defendants' health and safety are well protected and that we could proceed with this hearing in person. The defendants also requested an adjournment. Unclear to me whether that was part of the Zoom objection or what, but I will address that. The Attorney General here is alleging that the defendants are operating an adult foster care facility that's unlicensed and in violation of this court's permanent injunction. And if that is proven true, it presents its own danger to the public health and welfare. So I'm not willing to adjourn this matter. I would actually, if the reason for adjourning is COVID-19, in all realism here, I'd have to adjourn it for a year at least. I am not willing to adjourn it for any period of time other than the very short adjournment I gave from June 10th in order to make sure we had everything in place to welcome people into the courtroom safely. And I'm not willing to adjourn it when what's alleged by the Attorney General is a potential unchecked public health and welfare issue in and of itself. And then finally, along with this show cause request, the Attorney General filed a motion to reopen the file. The defendants object to that too, because they say they didn't violate the permanent injunction, but that's what hearings are for. The Attorney General has the burden of proof, and the Attorney General will be held to it. So I will order the file to be reopened for purposes of this hearing and exploring whether there has in fact been a violation of the permanent injunction. And with that, maybe we can dispense with opening comments if you're ready to proceed with witnesses.
We can, Your Honor, that's fine.
Okay, then you may call your first witness.
Before we do, Your Honor, we probably should sequester. I had everybody come in who could be potentially testifying, but I think it probably would be appropriate at this time to sequester the one witness who's not going to testify right at this moment, if that's okay with the court.
Yes,
Okay.
witnesses will be sequestered. That means that you must remain in the hallway and you must not discuss your testimony with other witnesses. And your first witness is?
Yes, the first witness that we wish to call is Ms. Vanita Bolden.
Okay, and before you take your seat there, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat. We do record in this courtroom in order to make a record, so if you could be mindful of the microphone. And also, I mean, all the masks muffle our speech, so you have to speak up and be close to the microphone. There you go. You can, yeah, I mean.
I know, so bear with me as well. I have to admit, this is my first in-person hearing since we've been under quarantine.
So you also are subject to the microphone rule, and you'll notice that there's one at your table and there's one at the podium.
Do you prefer that I stay here for spacing, Your Honor?
That's probably best, but just be mindful of the fact that the microphone does play an important role in making a record.
Okay, and is it okay for me to?
I think it's okay if
I don't want to
wish.
be. I don't want to be in violation or disrespectful, but it will make things.
It is fine with me, and same
I'm
with.
sorry, I can't hear you, Judge. I'm hearing noise in the background.
It's defense table, I believe.
I'm sorry.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, so, if you wish, you can take your mask off. I'm gonna leave mine on for your safety,
Okay.
so, that's fine.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And you'll want to start by stating and spelling your name, please.
My name is Vanita Bolden. It's spelled V as in Victor, A-N-I-T-A. Bolden, V as in boy, O-U-L, D as in dog, I-N.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bolden. And what is your position?
My position is a licensing consultant
And with which department?
with LAR, which is the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Department.
And is there a particular bureau within the department?
Yes, with the Bureau of Community and Health Systems.
How long have you held that position?
Approximately 20 years.
And briefly give us an idea of what some of your job responsibilities are.
My job duties are to regulate and monitor those adult foster care facilities that are out in the community that have an active license. There are different types. There's an adult foster care family home, small, medium, and large group homes. All of those homes have licensing rules that they must adhere to. So again, I regulate and make sure that they run according to the rules, that they're in compliance with the rules. I also receive enrolled applications for those either individuals or corporations that want to license and operate a group home out in the community. I will take them through that process. And I also complete special investigation or complaint investigations that come through our complaint department. Those are allegations of not following rules from the group homes that are already operating in the community, or there may be an allegation that there is an unlicensed adult foster care facility operating in the community.
What is your role in the setting of an unlicensed complaint that comes in?
Unlicensed complaint that comes in, I would be assigned to it, of course, and then I would conduct an investigation, and that includes doing an on-site inspection, as well as getting interviews, and I may, interviewing, the occupants or all of the parties that are involved, maybe requesting information, but that is the basis of a complaint investigation.
And how is it that you're familiar with this particular home on East Michigan Avenue in Ypsilanti?
With this particular property, I've been assigned 2 unlicensed complaints, one back in, I believe, 2013, and then one this year, February of 2020.
With respect to the prior complaint in 2013, what was the result of that investigation?
My findings after completing my investigation was that indeed there was an adult foster care home being run without a license.
Okay. And are you aware that there was a permanent injunction issued with this court back in April 2017?
Yes, our department received that notification.
Your Honor, I don't know if the court would prefer that we enter a copy of that permanent injunction, or is the court going to take judicial notice of that?
If there's no objection, I could take judicial notice of it as part of the court records.
No objection.
All right, I will
Okay.
do so.
Thank you, Your Honor. And with respect to the complaint that brought us to filing the motion, I'd like you to give us a little bit of a background in terms of how that complaint came to you.
It came through our complaint department, meaning someone called it in. I believe it was through Adult Protective Services. They called our complaint department, and of course our complaint department took the information, and then it was assigned to our field office in Wayne County. I believe my supervisor had an opportunity to look at it, and I was assigned the complaint. The intake is what we call it.
What action did you take once you received the complaint in February of this year?
I did an unannounced on-site inspection, and through that I was able to complete interviews with the occupants and those who were present at the time when I made my on-site inspection.
And would it be customary to perform an unannounced inspection upon receiving this particular type of complaint?
Yes, with all of our special investigations, it doesn't matter if it's an allegation of an unlicensed facility or if it's just a allegation of rule non-compliance. All special investigations are unannounced.
And what was the particular allegation back in February 2020?
Again, that there was a unlicensed adult foster care facility being ran on that property.
Okay. When did you visit the East Michigan Avenue facility?
I believe it was February the 20th of 2020.
Did anyone else accompany you on that visit?
Yes, Ms. Hunter, Audra Hunter, my supervisor.
And Ms. Hunter is your supervisor?
Yes, she is.
Okay. And at the time of that particular investigation, without getting into the details, we'll get into that through your testimony, was there a report that you prepared?
Yes, I did a special investigation report at the end of my investigation.
And is that report a customary type report that you must complete upon conducting any investigation?
Yes, all investigations, we're required to complete a special investigation report at the end to state our findings.
I would like to show her the report if I may. I don't know. I provided counsel with a copy as well.
You can approach the witness. Yeah, thank you.
I want to be safe for everybody's sake. Do you prefer that I mark it, or do you?
You mark it. If you
Okay.
need you have stickers there, it looks
Yes,
like?
I do.
Okay, you're all set then. You just need to mark.
Letters, numbers, do you have a?
Plaintiff uses numbers.
Numbers.
Defendant
Numbers.
uses letters.
Okay. I'm going to show you what is marked as proposed Exhibit 1, Ms. Bolden. Do you recognize that document? Take a moment to flip through it.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And is this a copy of the report that you prepared with respect to your investigation?
Yes, it is.
Any amendments to that report?
No.
Is that a copy of what is in the department's records?
Yes.
I would move to admit the special investigation report. Cover page is dated March 18, 2020.
Any objection, Mr. Quinn?
No objection.
Exhibit 1 is admitted.
Thank you. So what I'd like to have you do is describe to us when you arrived at the facility, who greeted you?
When I arrived on that day, I believe there was maybe 1 or 2 occupants outside smoking. I went up to the door. I believe I knocked and I identified myself. There was a lady there by the name of, I think, Chichi Frico, if I'm saying her name correctly. She stated that she was a worker
Object
there.
to this testimony, should be hearsay, Judge.
Response?
Your Honor, I would, I'm not asking her what somebody said, I'm just asking her who greeted her.
Okay,
I mean,
but
it's not for the truth of the matter, but just more in terms of who greeted her.
then you can just refrain from saying what she said.
Okay. There was a individual there, a worker, and other occupants there.
Okay. And did you interview the worker?
I did.
Okay. And in terms of your interview with the worker, would you have put anything that you found out in terms of findings from that worker in your report that's been admitted as Exhibit 1?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Who else did you interview?
I interviewed the occupants that I observed in the home.
And for purposes of this hearing, Your Honor, the report identifies occupants by letter number because there's a confidentiality of residents in this particular situation. We can continue to do that, or if the court is inclined, we could refer to first names. I just want us to be aware of the confidentiality.
How about first names? Is that gonna work for everyone?
I have no objection.
That's fine, I just
Okay,
wanna...
that might be easier.
Okay. So there were some residents that were at the home at the time?
Yes.
And how many residents did you observe?
I observed 4.
I believe 4. Okay. And can you recall the first names of those residents that you observed?
I believe it was Barry, John, Brandy, and Sherry.
Okay. And in terms of your observations of these residents, you were there to observe them, correct?
That is correct.
Why don't you tell us what you observed with respect to Barry?
With respect to Barry, he was ambulatory, able to walk. He was able to understand my questions that I asked of him. He stated, he resided in the facility, and he answered my questions.
Okay. And with respect to Barry, he's identified as occupant A in your report, is that correct? Were there any findings with respect to Barry's physical or mental health conditions?
My findings, again, that he was ambulatory, he was able to walk, dress himself, bathe himself independently.
Was he taking any medications?
He was taking medications. When I did a on-site kind of brief inspection of the property, I found that all of the occupants' medications were kept locked in a kitchen cabinet. I was shown the kitchen cabinet where it was locked, it was unlocked. There I observed different individual tubs with the residents' names listed on them and medication inside.
And did you say that that cabinet, it was locked?
It was locked and it was open
Okay.
at my request.
Okay, so you asked that it be unlocked?
Yes, so that I could see.
Who did you ask unlock it?
The worker, Ms. Franco.
Okay. With respect to the other residents that you would have interviewed, how about resident B, identified as occupant B, who is, I believe, John?
John, I observed him to be sitting on, I believe it was a couch with a blue pad in between the couch and his person. There was a walker to his side. Just from what my observation, he had problems ambulating and needed the walker's assistance. In speaking with him, I observed that he would probably need assistance bathing, getting dressed, and toileting.
Did you observe a tub at the facility with John's names with medications?
I believe there were, I don't remember all
Okay.
of the names, but
Okay. And then with respect to occupant C, who would be identifying her first name as Brandy, you interviewed her as well.
yes.
And what were your observations of Brandy?
My observation, Brandy, she understood my questions. It was disclosed that she had a mental illness. I believe her medications were in one of the individual tubs. She was ambulatory, able to walk independently on her own, able to bathe herself and dress herself.
With respect to to occupant D, who is identified as Sherry, you interviewed her as well?
Yeah, the same, I believe the same as with Brandy. She was able to ambulate by herself, feed herself, bathe herself. She disclosed that there were medical issues with her, and I believe she had medication kept in the locked cabinet as well.
Were you able to, with respect to your investigation, what were your findings with respect to food preparation?
Food preparation was disclosed. The worker prepared the food for all the occupants of the home.
Were there any findings during your investigation as to whether the residents were issued keys to the home?
None of the residents had keys. They could not show them to me at my request. They didn't have them.
With respect to where the medications were stored, could you tell us which particular room that you recall those being held?
In the kitchen.
That's a common area, is it?
So the way that the home is set up, I believe, if I remember correctly, I came in through the side door. You come in through the side door, I believe there's the kitchen there, and then if you go to your left, maybe the sitting area, like a den or a living room.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
During your time at the facility in February, did you walk throughout the home?
I walked through the first level, which is where we were.
So describe us, it's a two-story?
I believe it's a two-story home. I'm uncertain if there's a basement, but there's definitely a second floor upstairs. Again, when I entered, it was through the main level or the first level. I walked through the kitchen, and then I walked through that main area where there were, some of the occupants were sitting there, and so we were talking, and then I was able to walk back through. Forgive me, It was in February, so I'm not sure if I went to the left or the right, but there was a bedroom on that level too that I was able to, or got permission to walk in and just observe.
So on the first level that you were on, how many bedrooms did you observe?
I want to say maybe 2, but I'm not certain. I know there's at least 1 because I was able to view
Okay.
that room.
Aside from the 4 residents that were there, and aside from the individual that you indicated greeted you at the door, were there any other individuals at the home on the day that you appeared?
I believe there was one individual that came a little later. Forgive me, I don't know his name. It was a male. I did ask him if he would speak with me, and he declined.
Okay. Now, just for purposes of context, in terms of an unlicensed investigation, you're gathering information, correct?
Yes.
And what is the purpose of you gathering information?
Gathering information to try to determine what types of services or assistance the residents are receiving. Does it fall under the umbrella of adult foster care services, meaning personal care, supervision, protection, and safety? How often they're receiving that? And in addition, is there any payment that the either landlord or property owner is receiving?
With respect to the conditions and needs of the residents, were you able to determine whether any of the occupants had guardians or a power of attorney?
I believe based upon my investigation, there was at least one occupant that had a guardian.
With respect to the care, what were your findings in terms of what types of care the residents were receiving?
I believe that the types of care that was being provided was in alignment with adult foster care.
And in terms of payment, what were you able to determine, if anything?
On that day, I also spoke with Mr. Anabuchi very briefly over the phone. When I identified myself, we do have history, we know each other, just based on the other investigation, he told me that he was operating a room and board. And so for that type of property, you do receive payment from the occupants that live there.
And did you request a copy of any type of lease agreement or any other type of agreement?
Mr. Anabuchi and I, we were going to meet, and he did say that he had copies of the leases and that he would bring them. We did not have that meeting, and I was able to get copies of the leases from the Adult Protective Services worker.
And do you recall when you would have had copies of the leases? When did you receive them?
Maybe a week after I completed the on-site.
Would it have been before you finalized your investigative report?
Yes.
And did you find, based on your observations in February when you were at the home, was this a room and board only situation?
No, I did not conclude that it was only a room and board situation.
And what is that based upon?
Based upon my interviews, speaking with the occupants, speaking with the worker that was there that day.
Did you ever speak with anybody from Adult Protective Services?
I did. I spoke briefly with Ms. Davis.
And what would have been the reason for you speaking with Ms. Davis?
I knew that her department, Adult Protective Services, was doing an investigation as well on that property. And so we would speak just to kind of bring each other up to speed, to share information, of course. and just to discuss what was going on kind of with her investigation and what was going on with mine.
Okay. And in terms of any information that you would have obtained from APS or Ms. Davis, would you have noted that in your report?
Yes, I would have.
Okay. And just to clarify for the court, licensing has a distinct jurisdiction or responsibility that differs from APS.
Correct.
Could you explain for the court how that works?
So for our department, we are there strictly just to determine if there is an unlicensed or if the occupants that are in the facility, are they in need of AFC care? And if so, are they being provided that? So that's kind of all that we will look in. And then just for instance, if there's issues with abuse and or neglect, we would make a referral to Adult Protective Services because that is kind of their expertise, area of expertise.
So is it fair to say when you go out to do an investigation for unlicensed, it's very possible that APS may be involved conducting a separate investigation?
Correct.
Do you coordinate your investigations in any such way?
Sometimes we can, yes. If we get an allegation or a complaint and the worker is listed, you can call out and see kind of where they are in their investigation, or if they're even investigating, and see if you can schedule times where you can meet and go out together.
Were there any other individuals that you interviewed or met with during your investigation that started in February 2020?
Not that I can recall. Again, it was just the occupants, the worker. I did speak with Ms. Davis. I did speak with my coworker. Her name is Edith Richardson, because there was some information that came up involving another AFC home in Wayne County.
What type of information is this?
That in speaking, that there were residents from.
I'm gonna object to this. We're starting to get into hearsay, Your Honor. We're talking about someone spoke about another home. I don't know if this is a coworker is giving information and she's relaying that information with.
Your Honor, I'm not going to ask what somebody said, but I do think there has to be some leniency here, given that if they're working and doing investigations, and I can ask Ms. Bolden this, but I think I know what the answer is, that there's going to be records that they would have available to them because these are public records that they keep in terms of any of the investigations.
Okay, the objection is, well, I guess rephrase the question and we'll remind the witness not to tell us what someone said. So,
and keeping that in mind, Ms. Bolden, in terms of what types of findings did you make, if any, with respect to locations of residence?
I received information that verified that there were some occupants on the East Michigan Ave property that had come from an AFC home in Wayne County.
Okay. And where did you receive that information?
From a coworker.
Okay. With respect to this particular investigation, there were also, I believe, 2 other occupants that you mentioned in your report. They're identified as occupant E and occupant F. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Okay. E is Phyllis. And was Phyllis present when you were there that day in February 2020?
No, she was not.
Okay. And how did you obtain information, if any, from Phyllis?
Through the documents that were provided from my coworker.
Okay. And with respect to occupant F, who is, I believe, Tyrone, does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Was Tyrone present the day that you were there for your February 2020?
No, he was not present.
And so any of the information that you reference in your special investigation report that's been admitted as Exhibit 1, where did you obtain that information?
Again, from my coworker.
Who's in licensing?
Yes, she is.
And again, I'd like to show you, I provided counsel, and I have to, I just want to be upfront with the court. I have one set of color copy photos, and there are a couple photos that I was wondering if the court can make copies. I was not able to have someone in the office do it for me. I've given counsel some, but there are a couple here that, is that possible?
That you need for
Yes,
Mr. Quinn?
yes.
We can copy them, but we can't make color.
No, and I know that, and that's why I have just one set, and I apologize, given the circumstances, I'm somewhat limited with access to a color copy or two.
Okay. Thank you. It's hard to talk on the phone when I'm asking. We have someone coming to help.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just one.
Two? if
Two
you could.
each.
Thank you.
Lighten them up as best I could.
I know. Thank you, I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.
You know,
Ms. Bolden,
Yes.
when you were on site in February 2020, did you take pictures?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Why did you take pictures?
So that I could have a document of what I found
Okay.
during my investigation.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Your Honor? For the record, I also provided counsel with a copy of the photographs. I will disclose that The set that I provided to council is a black and white set. The set that I'm providing to Ms. Bolden is a color set. It's the only color set that we had available.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
If you could take a look at that, Ms. Bolden, I think, and I'll count the pages. I believe there are 10. Do you count 10 pictures?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And looking at those photographs, are those color copies of the photographs that you took when you were at the house in February 2020? When I say the house, I mean the property on East Michigan Avenue.
Yes, these were the photos that were taken that I took during that on-site inspection.
And the photos, the copies that are before you right now, do they fairly and accurately represent what you recall seeing in
Yes.
February 2020? I would move to admit the photographs as Exhibit 2.
All together as Exhibit 2?
Yes, if I
Okay,
may.
any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit 2 is admitted?
I would like to have you look at those photos, Ms. Bolden, and I just kind of wanted to go through them. The first photograph is a picture of what that's in front of you.
So just, wait a minute, I'm sorry, because they're all together as
Do
Exhibit 2.
you want me to do a one?
Well, I just want Mr. Quinn to know which one you're talking about.
Sure. If it's easier, Your Honor, I don't mind if we have it 2, I can do 2A, B, C. I'd be happy to label that for him.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Would that work for you? I can do that for you.
Yes.
May I see your copy? Thank you. Having you look, Ms. Bolden, at Exhibit 2, the first picture, I'm going to refer to it as 2A.
Okay.
What is that?
That is the cabinet in the kitchen where the medications were kept.
And if you could describe for us, what is that black horizontal bar there?
It appears to be a bar that's used to close the cabinet.
Okay. And there's something, if you can look at the photograph, there's see across here? Is that
Yes.
the closure?
The closure, and so what it did was, there was a little hook that came out on the opposite side, so when you close it, that black has a little opening so the hook can come out on the opposite side.
And is this the cabinet that you testified to earlier that you asked be unlocked?
Yes.
Then looking at the following picture, 2B, there's looks like a tub that says Tyrone on the top or the bottom. Do you see that?
Yes.
Could you describe what that is?
An individual tub with a with medication, that belongs to Tyrone,
And where was that?
inside of the cabinet.
Inside. And the next picture, which I'll identify as 2C, it looks like, is that the inside of the cabinet?
Yes, both doors are open.
And what did you see there?
Again, just individual tubs with the occupants' names on them and medication.
Did you look at any of the medications?
I did not.
And just to ask, when you're doing an unlicensed investigation, how does that differ from if this had been a licensee? In terms of the scope of your investigation? Would you be looking at violations of licensing rules and things of
Yes,
that
I
nature?
would, yes.
But in this case, the facility is not licensed, correct?
Correct.
So you cannot look at whether or not there are rule violations?
Correct.
Okay. In terms of the next photo, it's exhibit D. There is a tub that says John and Tyrone, correct?
My next sheet, yeah.
Okay. And was that what you observed inside the cabinet?
Yes,
And what could you observe was in those tubs?
medication.
Okay. The next picture is exhibit E. It says John on it. Do you
Yes.
see that? And what did you observe?
Medication inside individual tub.
The next photo, you took some photographs of the actual facility, the inside, correct?
Yes.
And the next photo is marked as 2F. What is that a picture of? It looks like a mattress.
Yes.
And could you tell us what that is?
It was a soiled mattress with indentation on it with a packet of blue pads.
And why would you take that photo?
So that I could document the condition of the mattress that I saw on that day.
And was that in one of the bedrooms
Yes.
on the first main level?
Yes.
Exhibit G, it looks like it's the kitchen table,
Yes.
and you took this photo as well, right?
Yes.
So what was your purpose of taking this photo?
Just to identify again what the condition of the kitchen looked like, as well as the little dining area there.
And the medicine cabinet was located in this kitchen?
Yes.
Correct. But it's not in this particular picture, is it?
I don't believe so, because the cabinet doesn't have that bar on it. So
Okay.
I believe that's different.
The next photograph is, I'll identify as 2H. It looks like there's a window with a mattress.
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and what is this photo of?
It was the same mattress that we saw previously, just a shot from further back so that the whole entire mattress is able to be documented again at the time that the on-site inspection was completed.
And what did you observe in that with respect to the mattress?
It was soiled with no bedding, no sheets on it or anything of that nature.
And again, exhibit I appears to be of the mattress. Is that the same mattress that you previously identified?
It is.
Okay, it's just a closer up photo?
Closer, because I wanted to show the indentation, just to get a good picture of, again, the condition of the mattress at the time that I did my unannounced on-site inspection.
And with respect to exhibit J, that looks like it's a mattress as well. Is that the same mattress?
Same mattress.
And again, if you could explain to the court what that photo shows.
A soiled mattress with an indentation and in the mattress.
Okay. give me a moment, I wanted to look over some of my notes. What did you conclude? Well, strike that. I wanted to go back, you talked with Mr. Anabuchi, correct? You
Very
mentioned-
briefly.
Was that on site or someplace else?
We had two brief conversations, one on site to let him know that I was there and conducting a investigation. And then we contacted each other. We played a little bit of phone tag. I called him, he would return my phone call. But eventually we were able to connect and again have a brief conversation.
And what was the purpose of that conversation?
Which one?
The first one.
The first one again was to identify myself, let him know that I was on his property conducting an investigation.
Okay. And what was the purpose of the second?
The second one was after I left his property, we had talked about meeting so that he could bring me copies of any documentation that he wanted and allow him to answer my questions or, kind of to have his say in an interview.
Did that meeting ever occur?
No, we scheduled a date and then he called back and he canceled.
Okay. Did he ever provide you with any documentation that you had requested in February?
I didn't get an opportunity to request any documents from him. I don't think that we talked about that. We talked about that he would bring it and then he canceled the meeting and I didn't request anything else from him.
Do you recall why the meeting was canceled?
I believe he said,
Objection to getting into hearsay.
Well, that may be true, Your Honor, but this is one of the defendants, so if there's a statement.
Party opponent?
I wasn't planning on calling him.
No, it's a statement of a party opponent.
Right, so,
Overruled.
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I forgot the question.
Well, what your understanding is of the reason why the meeting was canceled.
So yes, Mr. Anabuchi called back after we had scheduled a date, just stating he had spoken with his attorney and his attorney had advised him not to go and have a interview with me or speak with me without his attorney present, so he just canceled it.
So, what were the conclusions that you made in your investigation?
With all of the documentation that I received, reports, interviews, and what I observed that there was an unlicensed adult foster care facility being run on that property.
And did you, you put that in your report, was that report sent to Mr. Anabuchi?
Yes, it was.
Was it delivered as, did it ever come back as undeliverable or anything of that nature?
No, it did not. Let me just say, the report is mailed from our central office, so I haven't received any word that it came back.
Okay, it hasn't been brought to your attention that there was-
Correct.
If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Just going to briefly look over my notes, see if there's anything else, but I think that. I think that's all that I have for you, Ms. Bolden, but Mr. Quinn will probably have some questions for you.
Okay.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes. Ms. Bolden, prior to February of 2020, had you conducted an investigation at a property owned by Mr. Odabuche at 1654 Weird Street?
I don't recall. I know that, I don't recall the exact address. That is possible. There were other investigations for some of his properties that we did, so that is possible, yes.
Okay, do you recall creating a report on January 9th of 2017 for a property, an investigation you conducted at 1654 Weir Street in Ypsilanti, Michigan?
I would have completed one if it was part of a regular investigation, but
Do you
yes.
recall that report?
I don't recall the report, but I know that if there was a investigation, if there was an intake, then yes, I would have completed a report.
And Judge, if I may, present this report.
You may.
This is Judge, I need a copy of this report, man. All right, provided, oh, I guess she's got it.
Can you get another copy? Thanks.
Can I have the originals again? Oh, it's different, sorry. Misunderstood.
You may.
Thank you.
Do you recall this report?
When you say recall, you know.
Did you write this report?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I was just gonna say I don't remember writing it, but obviously I did. 'Cause
Does
I
looking at it help refresh your memory?
Yeah.
And at that time, do you recall what you determined?
If I look at the findings, just read that to you?
Yeah.
Let me do, okay. It says, I recommend that the complaint be closed because although all of the elements of adult foster care is being provided by the owner/operator to one resident, a license is not required.
Okay, and that was your finding on, and you recall the date of that report?
Yeah, the date is January 9th of 2017, and I signed it electronically signed it on December the 27th of 2016.
And this home on the address you would agree is 1654 Weird, W-I-A-R-D? And
Yes,
that's Ypsilanti, Michigan,
yes,
48198.
yes,
And this was addressed to Jameson Onabuche,
yes,
is that correct?
yes,
And this was, and Mr. Onabuche at the time was also the owner of what is known as Chinook Homes?
to my knowledge,
To your
yes.
knowledge, okay. And so, at that time, you said that he was, so at that time, there was no violation, is that correct? You determined that there was no violation?
That's,
I'm sorry.
that is correct based on the condition.
But now you're saying, fast forward, I guess approximately 3 years forward to February of 2020, you're now saying that Mr. Onabuche operated his property on Michigan different than he operated his property on Weird?
I don't know that I'm saying that it's any different because if you look at this, the report that you submitted, it says all components are there. The difference in this one is that there is a capacity of one resident receiving AFC care. And so I believe based upon the licensing rules, you don't need a you don't need a license. So there are different properties and different capacities. There are different occupants.
Okay.
One occupant here, several at the one at East Michigan.
And let's get into the occupants. First off, you said that the occupants did not have keys. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But you don't know whether or not at some point in their time living at the property on Michigan Avenue, whether or not they had keys, correct?
That is correct.
There's whether they lost their keys, correct?
That is correct.
Or whether they just didn't have their keys in their possessions at that particular time.
I asked specifically if they had keys, and their answer was no.
Right, but in terms of whether or not they actually had keys given to them, you would not know.
Given to them after the date that I did
No.
on the site inspection, no, I would not know.
You would not know,
I would
okay.
not know.
And there didn't appear that they had problems accessing the property, correct?
No, they said there was always a staff person present to allow them entry into the facility.
So they were able to get in and outside the property?
Yes,
Okay. And now you say you went here on February 20th, was it February 9th of 2020?
I believe it was February 20 of 2020.
Okay. How many times did you actually visit the property?
Just that one time.
Oh, so you only went to the property one time?
That is correct.
So you never came back to verify whether or not any of the tenants now had keys?
No, I did not.
Okay. You never verified whether there was always what you referred to as a staff person on site at the property, correct?
I was going by what the occupants told me. They
Right,
said-
but I'm saying, did you verify it? Did you come back after that to see?
No, I didn't.
Do they always have a staff person there? Or what
No.
you call a staff person? Now, you also indicated that, I believe, did you ever find out, you said they came from adult foster care services, a previous adult foster care facility. Did you ever find out actually how the tenants got there? When I say got there, I mean to the 1269 East Michigan property.
There was a brief discussion regarding that with my coworker. I don't know if you're gonna say that's hearsay.
No, I don't want to know, I'm just saying, do you know how the tenants got from the previous, adult foster care home to 1269 East Michigan?
There was a discussion about that, how they got there.
Okay. But to your own recollection, I mean, in other words, there was no evidence that actually, Mr. Odabuche marketed himself to these individuals as an adult foster care, correct?
Not to my knowledge. No.
Okay. And so, when you, met with, these individuals, I believe you said occupant A was Perry?
I think it's Barry.
Barry?
Yes.
Okay, do you know, and you said at some point, you received a lease from Barry, or you received a lease that indicated that Barry was residing at the property, is that correct?
That is correct. I received a copy of.
Okay, did you review that, that document?
Yes, I looked it over, yes. I did.
Okay, did you ever verify whether or not that was actually a document that Barry signed?
I did not verify, I received information from Barry.
Okay, and so did you at any point verify whether or not Mr. Odabuche had entered into, well, he told you, Mr. Odabuche actually told you that these were tenants, correct?
He said that they were, he was operating a room and board.
Right.
And that he had leases. That
And he had leases.
Yes.
And so that was consistent with what Mr. Odabuche told you as it relates to Barry, correct? Based on what you saw?
Meaning that there was a lease that I saw that has his name on it, yes.
Between himself and Barry.
Yes,
And that would also be true for occupant B, John, correct?
correct, yes, I believe so. I just don't have copies of them, but yes.
That there was a lease that existed between Mr. Onabuche or Chinook and John.
Yes,
And that would be consistent for Brandy, correct?
yes,
And that would also be consistent for Sherry, correct?
yes.
Okay. And so, and there was also, you looked in, there were pictures shown to you. It appeared that there were rooms available for people to sleep in, is that correct?
I observed one room, yes.
And that was a room that was occupied. Do you know who that room was occupied by?
I believe it was occupied by Mr. Moore, and the bed that I took a picture of was his roommate.
Mr. Moore, who's Mr. Moore?
I think John, I'm sorry.
John. So one of the occupants actually had a room.
Yes,
And so so they would get a room, but then there was a common area for the kitchen, is that correct?
correct.
And then there was a common TV area or living room area?
I think that was the same area that they
Oh,
were sitting in.
So the kitchen
Big area.
was a common area?
Yes,
Okay. And so when you go and you say that, you said that there was pictures that were shown to you, and I just want to approach the witness with the pictures. I had a particular question. Can I approach the witness?
Yes,
So I can
please.
just ask her, do you have the pictures still?
I do, I have it.
Okay.
There was exhibit 2A. You said that there was a lot, but there was, that's the cabinet? Right, but there's no picture of a lot that was taken, correct?
No, I did not take a picture of it.
Okay. And, additionally, the bathroom was a common area, was that correct?
Bathroom is a common area, yeah.
Okay,
generally, yes.
so the pictures that are shown, because I believe each one of the occupants, Barry, John, Brandy, and Sherry, were on some form of medication, is that correct?
Yes,
So instead of it being the medication being in the bathroom, they were in this cabinet, is that correct?
that is correct.
And each one of these individuals' medications were labeled, correct?
That is correct.
With their name on it.
That is correct.
So it kind of identified who the medication belonged to.
That is correct.
Okay. And did it appear that that any of these individuals had a problem with that?
You're gonna have to,
Probably like we don't want our medications separated.
no,
Or that our I want my medication in my room only, that's where I wanna keep my medication.
I don't know that they were given a choice.
Okay, but there was no objection to the medication being where it was at, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And how long did you actually stay in the property? I mean, what time did you arrive?
I don't know the time. I know that we were there approximately 2 hours. Maybe
2 hours?
Hour and a half to 2 hours, yes.
Okay, and you said you made various observations. So Perry's observations is he was able to answer your questions, correct?
Barry, yes.
Barry, I'm sorry, I'm calling Perry. Barry was able to answer your questions, correct?
Yes,
I believe you said that he was, he could walk
yes.
and he seemed like he could function independently?
I would not agree to that statement. Depends on what you mean independent.
He could dress himself.
He could dress himself.
He could feed himself.
Yes,
Okay, and he could walk
yes,
and he could answer your questions.
yes,
Okay. Then you said John was sitting, he needed assistance walking, is that correct?
he had a walker.
He had a walker,
beside him, yes.
but he was able to move around with the walker? Or did you see him, did you observe him walking, using the walker?
I did not observe him walking.
He stayed,
He stayed seated.
but he was able to answer your questions?
He was able to answer my questions.
Okay.
yes.
And then there was Brandy, she understood your questions, correct?
Yes,
And she was able to feed and dress herself, correct?
yes,
And she was able to walk, correct?
yes,
And then there was Sherry, who also was able to answer your questions.
Yes.
And could feed herself and clothe herself, correct?
yes,
Okay, so in an hour, you said an hour and a half or 2 hours?
yes,
Basically, these individuals, except for maybe John, could walk without assistance,
yes,
could answer questions,
yes,
could feed themselves,
yes,
and could also clothe themselves,
yes.
okay? But it's still your determination that they needed to be in adult foster care?
Yes, just because you can answer a question doesn't mean that you're giving an accurate account of what your cognitive abilities are.
But you would agree that an hour and a half is not a good measure of somebody's cognitive ability?
I would not agree to that.
Or you think that you can determine somebody's cognitive ability in an hour and a half?
I think you can tell if they have limitations, and I was able to do that.
Right, but I'm saying to the extent of those limitations and whether and how, at what level they're able to function would require more than an hour and a half observations.
I think you can get insight from an hour and a half, and then if you need some additional information, you could get that with more time.
Okay, what follow-ups did you do with each one of those individuals?
I didn't do any follow-up.
Okay, and so, you had mentioned in your report that I believe it was occupant D had a guardian in your report of February 20 of 2020.
I would have to go to my report.
Yeah, you can look at it.
Thank you. Yes, that is correct.
And in fact, you indicated that Mr. Onabuche and CC Onabuche were the guardians, is that correct?
That was based upon what was reported to me.
Right, but I mean, did you do any independent verification of that, like get the guardianship orders or anything like that to verify whether that's an accurate statement?
No, I did not.
Okay. You also indicated in your report, I believe, that the individual that was determined as, I guess you call him the worker or the staff, Ms. Frisco,
Yes.
you said that was Mr. Onabuche's sister,
That's what she reported.
but did you do any verification to verify whether or not there was any relationship between Mr. Onabuche and this Ms. Frisco?
No, I did not.
You would agree that operating a room and board is not against the law, correct?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay. And did you ever verify whether there was a certificate of compliance or allowing this property to be rented out at 1269?
No, I did not.
You never verified that?
I did not.
Okay. And has in a sense, I guess the four individuals that you identified, they've already been removed from the property, isn't that correct?
Unknown to me.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know what they did, okay. Your office would be responsible for that?
Not for follow-up of that knowledge, no.
Okay. But it was always your impression, or I guess based on your conversation, that Mr. Onabuche never claimed to you that he was running adult foster care, is that correct?
He did not admit to that.
Right. Now, with regards to the payments of the rents, did you receive that? Did you verify whether or not there were actually rental payments made to Mr. Onabuche?
No, I did not.
Did you verify the sources of income that the individuals that you, Barry, John, Brandy, and Sherry received?
No, I did not.
And so I'm looking. Now, there was no, you identified that there was a guardian deed, that Mr. Onabuche and CC Onabuche were the guardian, but you did not verify whether or not that was the case with an order. Also, is that true?
That's correct.
Also, you identified occupancy having a guardian. Did you at any point find the guardianship papers for occupancy?
No. I did speak with them.
Did you ever, for occupants, or Barry, John, Brandy, and Sherry, there were these medical issues that you identified. Did you ever receive any independent medical information verifying that they actually suffered from these various medical issues?
There were some assessments that I received, I believe, on Sherry and Brandy.
Okay, but you did not provide you did not provide copies of that?
I have copies, they were made a part of my report, and I believe I listed them in my report. No, I apologize, I don't think I have them here, but I did list them in
You
the.
listed what the elements were.
And I listed the name of the report and the date of the report.
And you identified Ms. Brasco as a staff member. Did you verify whether there was any employment agreement, independent contractor agreement, or any type of verification of employment between Chinook and Ms. Fresco?
I was unable to because I didn't meet with Mr. Anabuchi.
No, but I'm saying, were you able to locate it?
No, I did not request it at that time. I spoke with her.
And at some point in your report, you do identify the amount that was paid as rental payments to Mr. Anabuchi, isn't that correct?
In my report, I list what I saw as the amounts on the leasing agreements.
Okay, and so the $700 to $900 per month rental amount, that is based upon your observations of the rental agreements?
Correct.
And those amounts were somewhere in between 700 to 900 were the ranges paid by the four individuals you identified as very generous?
That were listed on the rental agreements as to what they would pay per month.
They would pay, okay. I have another document, Judge, that I'd like a copy of.
Another copy?
I just have a question, if I can see, the January 9th, 2017 report that was presented to you,
Yes.
and where it was determined that there was activity, but license was not required,
Yes,
that you're not disputing that that was a report that was written by you, correct?
that's correct.
And that's a fair and accurate depiction of your report?
Correct.
Okay, I would ask that that be entered as Defense Exhibit A.
Any objection?
No objection.
Exhibit A is admitted?
Would I give it to I just hold on to it, Judge? Hold on to the exhibit?
Yeah, you can just leave it on your table there. Someone put
pushed it back behind all the water.
Wasn't me.
I know.
Do you recall, on conducting an investigation of Mr. Onabuche and Chinook at a property located at 4154 Cadillac in Wayne, Michigan?
I do not.
Okay. If I were to provide you with that report, would refresh your recollection?
Yeah.
Can I proceed with this? Ms. Bolden, are you familiar with this investigation?
I am not.
Okay. I understand that this appears to have been conducted by a K. Robinson.
That's the signature that I see on the report. Yes.
Okay, but what I'm referring to, if you could go to, well, I guess first, is this report consistent with how investigation reports are put together at your office?
It looks as if it's the same.
The same?
Similar to a report that I have submitted, yes.
Okay, and I would like to refer you to page 4. I'm looking at subsection 3, methodology,
Yes,
February 21st, 2020.
yes.
I believe it was telephone call made by licensing consultant B. Bolden.
Well, when you say telephone call made, that means the person writing the report made the call to me.
So you received a call about this report?
It's stated here, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And was this call received, given to you by K. Robinson?
Yes,
Okay. And after consulting with, talking with you, do you know what the findings are as it relates to this property at 4154 Cadillac?
after reading her recommendation, I see what the findings are, yes.
And what are the findings?
Her findings are, I recommend that the complaint be closed because the owner-operator is not or is no longer providing adult foster care services.
And do you recall the date of this?
The date that Ms. Robinson wrote down is February 28, 2020.
Okay. And so this is roughly 8 days after your investigation, right?
My investigation started, yes.
After your investigation on the Michigan property.
Yes.
Okay, and so, and I know you were consulted.
She
But-
called me.
I'm just looking at what it said.
I understand.
It was contacted, you were contacted.
I was contacted, yes.
Do you know, because you said that there was, at this 4154 Cadillac, the finding was no adult foster care services.
Based on her report.
Right.
I know that, yes.
And then, but do you know, and then we went And then we had the other one, but that was, I'll give it to you that was like 3 years ago. That was on the, Weird property. There was no adult foster care services because you said that the number of individuals that were in the property.
Services were being provided, but because of one individual, a license was not needed.
So with this particular property at 415 Cadillac, do you know do you know whether or not Mr. Onabuche was operating the Michigan, the 1269 East Michigan Avenue property any differently than the 4154 Cadillac?
I know nothing about the 451 Cadillac.
Even though you were consulted or
Wasn't
contacted?
consulted.
I'm not using the wrong word.
Okay.
You were contacted via telephone?
She contacted me via telephone to ask me a question. So
Right.
I don't know the findings or any dealings of her investigation.
Right.
I answered a question.
Right, but let me say this. She let you know what she was doing, and she being Miss Robinson.
She let me know that she had an intake and she was investigating an unlicensed
Right, and you
allegation.
And you were made aware of the address?
I was made aware that we had the same individual.
Right, and so you're saying that that during this conversation, there was no like, hey, I got this, I got them with too many people that are incapacitated or can't live independently, the place is dirty, I don't, some of the things you put in your report. Your report was actually written 8 days prior to this report coming out.
I believe my report started on the 20th,
Right.
correct? And then hers is on the 28th.
Right.
So again, we had a brief conversation about an intake that I had just received
Right.
and a mutual party.
Right.
But we did not discuss her investigation in detail.
Because how I'm understanding it, when you did your report, you spoke to someone else. That's how you found out about the other AFC home, adult foster care home, correct?
Based upon what the occupants told me.
Right, no, but I'm saying you spoke to another person in your office.
Based upon, yes, what the occupants told me. Yes,
Right,
I did.
and you consulted with them.
Yes, I did.
And you got information from them, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay, but you're saying that even despite the fact that this person consulted you,
Contacted me.
I'm using the wrong word, you're correct, contacted you, and actually contacted you 8 days after you had already been to the property on Michigan Ave, correct?
Yes.
Roughly 8 days. Two totally different observations.
Two totally different properties, probably two totally different occupants.
Right.
I don't know.
But you would at least agree two totally different determinations.
Yes, two totally different, based upon what I'm looking at, yes.
Okay, and despite this, you're saying that Mr. Onabuche operated, you're saying it's your opinion or your determination that Mr. Onabuche operated the Michigan property, 1269 Michigan, different than 415 Cadillac.
I don't know that it was different because I don't have any information about what was done on the Cadillac property. I based my conclusion and my report based upon my investigation of the Michigan Ave property.
Exactly, and after that, there was, and Miss Robinson contacted you. There was no information put in this report, it appears, identifying the Michigan property and some of the conditions that existed there, correct?
I don't know. I haven't had an opportunity. I don't believe that she mentioned the Michigan Ave. Is that what you're asking?
Right.
No, I don't believe that she mentioned anything.
Right.
No, I don't see any. I'm just skimming it, but I don't see that the.
And you would say that at least in your mind, and you can tell me what was in your mind, that as of February 28th, you believed that Mr. Onabuche and Janot were violating the adult foster care statute, correct?
I'm trying to look at some of the dates that I had on.
I'm just going based on the date that, as of February 20th, you wrote down that he was violating.
Yeah, well, I didn't get to that conclusion until March 17th of 2020.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is I am still conducting and getting information.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know at that time that Ms. Robinson did whatever she did, that I had my conclusion established.
But there were concerns you had, right?
Concerns about
the property. You walked out of there with concerns on February 20th.
Oh, yes,
Right.
of the East Michigan Ave, yes.
Right, but
Yes.
somehow, and I know you can't answer that, whatever concerns you had are not reflected in the report that was done by Ms. Robinson.
Correct.
Okay. I would just mark this as Defense Exhibit B. This,
And you're moving admission?
yes, Judge.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit B is admitted?
So it appears that at least from the exhibits we have, there were multiple investigations of Mr. Odabuche's properties,
Correct.
okay? By various people in your office.
Correct.
Okay. No further questions, Judge.
Redirect, Ms. McLean?
Ms. Goulden, I want you to take a look at Exhibit A and B. Do you have those in front of you?
Yes.
Exhibit A concerns 1654 wire, correct?
Correct.
This is not what brought us here today, correct?
Correct.
With respect to Exhibit B, 4154 Cadillac, you could look at page 7.
Okay.
Under analysis, what does it say?
Says the home is vacant according to the owner and Adult Protective Services.
So that had a certain finding related to the property on Cadillac. What, if any, does that impact your investigation that you started conducting in February 2020 at the East Michigan Avenue property?
None.
Is it fair to say that each property is investigated for what facts present
Correct.
at the time?
Correct.
I also wanted to ask you, on cross-examination, you were asked questions by Attorney Quinn about guardians, and I believe you started to testify that you contacted the guardian for occupancy.
For Brandy, yes, I did.
So were you aware that there was a guardian?
Yes, I was aware.
And in general, you were asked questions by Attorney Quinn about follow-up. Did you do this follow-up? Did you follow up on that? Is that something that you would typically do?
If it's needed, yes.
Did you feel it was needed in this case?
I did not.
And is it fair to say that the meeting that you were scheduling with Mr. Anabuchi was going to be a time for you to go over questions and particular issues?
Yes,
And that meeting never occurred, correct?
that is correct.
And it was because Mr. Anabuchi canceled the meeting.
That is correct.
During your investigation of the East Michigan Avenue property in February, were there questions that you found that some of the occupants could not answer?
There were questions that I asked, and they may have been answered, but they didn't make sense, if I can elaborate.
And is that something
It
that
did make sense to what I saw.
Gotcha. Is that something APS might be involved in if there were concerns about somebody's cognitive?
I would object. This is current speculation. I don't believe Ms. Bolden is part of APS.
Well, you've had dual investigations before in your experience, haven't you?
Yes, we have.
Overruled.
Is that something, if you had questions or concerns about a particular resident's physical or mental capabilities, is that something that you would refer over to Adult Protective Services?
Yes, we would ask Adult Protective Services to do an assessment so that they could determine kind of what their cognitive abilities are and needs and things like that. Yes.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes.
During your investigation, were you able to determine who administered medications to the residents at East Michigan Avenue?
Based upon my interview, yes.
And who was,
I would object, Your Honor. This is the roundabout way to get hearsay testimony.
Well, it is. It's also all contained in the Exhibit 1 that's been admitted without objection. So, overruled.
go
So
ahead.
based upon my interviews, all participants were conclusive and confirmed that Ms. Frico or Frisco administered the medication.
And I believe you testified earlier that you, when you were at the facility in February, you observed a lock on the medicine cabinet?
I believe there was a lock. It was in February. I know what I took a picture of, that's what was there.
Okay.
I can say yes to that.
And for the record, FRICO is F-R-I-C-O.
Frico. Thank you. So when we came to the medicine cabinet, that's what we saw, and I asked her to open it.
Why did you find that this is not, with your investigation in February, with respect to the East Michigan Avenue property, why did you find this was not just room and board?
Because of the services that were being provided and needed by the occupants within the facility.
And when you were at the facility on February 22nd, I believe, is that correct? I don't want to misstate. Is that the day you were actually at the facility? It says
Actually, February the 20th, I
20th.
conducted.
Were you able to determine how many residents were living there at that time?
It was an approximate, I believe, I saw 4 occupants there. There was an approximate between 4 to maybe 7. I can verify 4 that were there.
Okay. With respect to Exhibit 1 that was admitted already, excuse me, on page 6, was the date that you finalized your report?
March the 17th of 2020.
Is it fair to say between on or about February 20th of 2020 and March 17th of 2020 is when you conducted and gathered your information and compiled this report?
Yes.
Were you able, during your investigation of the East Michigan Avenue property, were you able to determine how long the occupants that you were aware of at the time you were there were living at the property?
Based upon my investigations, anywhere from, I believe, a couple of months to a year.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Do you want to follow up with any recross, Mr. Jones?
Just briefly, Judge. As you mentioned, medications being administered, did you see any schedule when they were administered?
No, I did not.
Okay, did you see any medication sheets that describe what medications were supposed to be given to what occupants at what time?
I did not see it, no.
Okay. And so was there any type of checklist, like Monday, you know how the medications have the days of the week and the person's name? Was there any, did you see that?
I didn't see it.
Okay. And so, and then as it relates to meal prep and people getting meals, was there a designated breakfast, lunch, and dinner time that you saw scheduled?
I did not.
Okay. And as to what the meals were going to be prepared for each day, did you see anything that indicated what meals individual occupants were supposed to receive on particular days?
I did not.
Did you even verify who bought the groceries?
Based upon my investigation and interviews, staff members buy the groceries.
Okay, but the money for the groceries, actually, the individual, so you're saying they come out of pocket, the staff members come out of their own pocket?
I'm saying I don't know. I know that based upon my interviews, staff members complete the shopping.
Shopping, so, but what I'm saying is, where did the money for the shopping come from?
I didn't ask.
You didn't verify where the money
I
for the
didn't
shopping
ask.
come from? Okay,
No.
or what what services were used to get those groceries? Do you know whether any third-party services were used to bring the groceries to the Michigan property address?
I didn't ask.
No further questions, Judge.
All right, thank you. You may step down. Thank you so much for coming in today. You can, if those are the
They are.
people, you can drop them off with the assistant AG. And you may call your next witness. Would you step up to this chair here, please? And then before you take your seat there, you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat.
Judge, I just wanted to make sure, did we swear in Ms. Bolden?
Yes.
We did, okay. I just wanted to confirm. Good afternoon, Ms. Davis.
Hi,
Would you state and spell your name to start with?
sure, it's Rashana Davis, Rashanna, last name is Davis.
Thank you.
And before we begin, if it's easier for you because we're recording your testimony, if you find it difficult, if you had to take your mask off, but it may be one that you can talk easily with as well, so.
It's up to you.
It is up to you, I just didn't want you to feel that it was hard for you to.
Fine. I want to make sure I'm heard. I'm a little quiet.
Yeah. It's hard to talk to.
It
them.
is. Ms. Davis, what is your position?
I work for Adult Protective Services in Washtenaw County.
And what is your title?
I'm an investigator.
How long have you had that position?
That specific one since 2018, so about 2 years.
Okay. Prior to that, what did you do?
I was a Children's Protective Services investigator for 10 years.
And in terms of your job responsibilities as an adult protective service worker, could you give us a brief description of what you do?
Sure, so I investigate allegations of abuse and neglect of vulnerable adults that come through our centralized hotline of people reporting.
And with respect to the East Michigan Avenue property that we're here on today, how is it that you're familiar with that facility?
So we got a referral in that the house was being ran as an unlicensed adult foster care, and that there were vulnerable people in the house in poor condition. In addition to that, there was a specific, a separate referral on a specific resident in the house that had gotten some money stolen from her. So they were kind of tied together in that way.
Okay. And in terms of your role as an adult protective service worker, you're looking at, if I'm correct, whether there is abuse or neglect with respect to a particular adult.
Yes, so, but there were 10 adults in the house, so all of them
Okay.
essentially.
Well, let's back up a bit here. In terms of the East Michigan Avenue property, you said you had this referral. When was this referral that you received?
I received it back in February of this year, I believe on the 6th or the 7th. I believe it was the 7th, actually.
And when did you go to the facility?
I went that day.
And did anyone else go with you?
On that particular visit, no. I went by myself.
And could you tell us what you observed on that day, the beginning of February 2020?
Yes. So on that day, I found 7 residents that were actually in the home, but I talked to, actually prior to going out there, I knew that there were 2 people that were already in the process of being removed from the house because my coworker had a case on one of those individuals. So I kind of went into it knowing that there were several people in the house. But on that specific day, there were 7 residents in the house. And upon talking to those residents, I learned that actually 10 people lived there.
And in terms of your investigation that you conducted for APS on or about February 6th or 7th of 2020, what observations did you make of first the facility when you were there?
So it's a very large house with multiple rooms. So I was just trying to glean where everyone was sleeping. Specifically, they were telling me who shared rooms and kind of showing me around where everyone is. Some people had their own rooms, some people were sharing rooms. So I was just kind of getting the lay of the land of that. There was some allegations that their food benefits cards were being kept and that the food and the medication was also being stored and possibly locked. So I was making observations on that, and there was a cabinet that was not locked at the time, but had a padlock on it. The refrigerator also had a locking mechanism, but was not locked at the time. So those were the kind of observations I was making about the facility, just specifically logistically where everyone was and what the conditions were like. There was food in the home at the time, and I was just trying to gather from the residents what their living situation was.
What were you able to observe with respect to the residents? And just for purposes of this hearing, we're using first names.
Okay. So the residents that were there on the specific day, the first day that I went, were, gosh, there's so many, Brandy, Sherry, Gary, Barry, John, Phyllis, missing one. They'll come to me. So they were all there at the time, and I kind of individually talked to each person.
And result of you talking to them individually, could you give us an idea if you were able to determine what needs, as APS, I guess I should back up, what's something that APS does? Do you assess individuals and determine what their needs are?
Yes, so I'm first trying to figure out, are they vulnerable? So what is their vulnerability? So I'm asking them things like, do you have a guardian? What are your medical conditions? Are you able to, feed yourself, toilet yourself, bathe yourself, that sort of thing. So I went down that kind of laundry list with everyone. Tyrone was the other person I was freaking. So, and I found out that 3 of the residents already had guardians. And so that made me kind of know that, okay, they have some needs to where a judge has decided that they are not able to handle their own affairs.
Do you remember who the 3 residents were?
Yes, Brandy was the one of them, Tyrone was the other. The third was, she wasn't there that day, but it was Mary. So I didn't speak to her that day, but upon talking to other people, I found out that she did have a guardian. So those 3 people already had guardians in the home.
And in terms of that day, how did you leave there in terms of those 7, I think you said, residents that were there? Did you need to do follow-up with any
Yes,
of them?
so 2 of the residents in particular, I had serious concerns, did not have cognitive capacity to care for themselves whatsoever. So that would be Sherry, who was very alarmed, like she was saying that she wanted to get out of there. She was making comments on her condition, that she was in really poor condition. She doesn't normally look like this. She was making comments about the fact that she was on medication that she didn't know. She felt very drugged. She did not feel herself. She told me a little bit about her medical history. She had a double mastectomy, so she was a cancer survivor. And so I was asking her, did she have any follow-up for that? She says no. She wasn't going to the doctor. She told me she didn't know what medication she was taking. So I was very alarmed about her because she would kind of talk in circles, and I wasn't sure what information was quality and what wasn't, because she just didn't seem to have a good idea. She was oriented to the season, but not the date or the year, that type of thing. And then another person that I became concerned with was John, because I literally couldn't hold a conversation with him. He's very nice, very pleasant, but was not really giving me a lot of good answers to my questions about how long he had been there. I don't think I got any response about kind of what year it was, what date it was, but he seemed to express that he was fine, but I did not believe that. And then the 2 residents that I spoke to on that day who had guardians were Brandy and Tyrone, and I just really wanted to get a hold of their guardians to see, are you aware they're in their situation? Why not a licensed home? What's really going on with them? So those were kind of the immediate concerns that I had.
Well, were you able to make any determination as to the level of or degree that any of those 7 residents were able to live fully independently?
Yes, so in regards to Sherry, it's very clear that she just was not able to handle her own affairs. She couldn't tell me how she had gotten there, so that was just kind of off the bat. I was very concerned. John, the same way. Definitely. Brandy is she has a guardian. She was able to talk to me she's a good historian of herself. So she did mention she has some significant medical history or mental health history, which is kind of how she got there. She mentioned living at another place and wasn't exactly quite sure how she had ended up in that specific house, but she was able to give me her mother's information. Her mother's her guardian. So I kind of had some reference for her and kind of see hey, what's going on? How did she get there? So she kind of gave me an overarching idea of how the house was ran. She said that she was getting her medication administered to her, that it was kept aside from her, that she was getting meals there at the house, that someone was shopping for her and getting her all her necessities. She said that Jameson was her payee. There's a couple of residents in the house that he's her payee. So I was also trying to get an idea of if they were paying rent or how that was being going, but she says, Jameson is my payee, he takes my rent and then gives me an allowance. So that was the impression she gave me, but it's kind of different for everyone is what I began to learn. Sherry specifically says that, well, I don't, they take me to the bank, we take out some money and that's kind of it. She didn't really know how much she was paying or what was really going on. So each individual person kind of had their own thing going on. Phyllis, she said that she was previously in another house. She couldn't really explain how she had ended up there at that house, but she said she was comfortable there. She seemed to be okay. Tyrone, he was asleep on my first visit, but when I came back and talked to him, you know, he presented as obviously having some mental health issues, but wasn't able to really give me any qualitative information about why he was there.
Did you, let me ask you this, have you requested guardians as a result of this visit? In early February, have you, when I mean you, APS, have they requested or petitioned the probate court for guardianship for any of the residents who maybe didn't have a guardian?
Yes, I petitioned Sherry first for mental health treatment into the hospital, and then later petitioned for her to get a guardian, so she currently has a guardian, and I did the same for John.
And I didn't mean to cut you off. I think you said you went out in February on or about the 6th or 7th, one of those days?
The 7th.
7th? Did you go back another time in February?
Yes, so I went back on the 14th of February as well, because I was trying to catch the resident that I missed, which was Mary, and I did end up speaking to her. And then I spoke with Sherry again, and still was very concerned, and she was saying she wanted to get out of there, and I was like, okay, so on the 28th is when I went back and petitioned her into the hospital, and EMS took her to the hospital, and she was admitted into the psychiatric unit.
During part of APS's investigation, were you able to establish or determine how long the residents had been in the home?
Yeah, some of them yes, some of them not quite. I mean, the best that I could do is really trace what previous addresses I had for them or where they had been. A couple of them were previously in a licensed home that I kind of traced them straight from into this house on East Michigan Avenue. So I was able to get some sort of time, but none of them were able to really tell me like a finite.
And with respect to how APS left it at the time, were there any residents that you still needed to have evaluations or assessments performed on?
Yeah, so John is still in the house because we have to be able to determine his level of care to place him. And at this point, the only medical treatment he's getting is from a doctor that comes to the house. So I don't have anyone who's laid eyes on him to really see what he needs. And that's kind of what we're working on now.
Okay. And did you, during any of this, have any discussions with Mr. Anabuchi?
Yeah, we've talked a couple of times briefly.
Did you also talk to anybody with licensing, adult foster care licensing?
Yes, I made a report to Laura in Wayne and Washtenaw County, and I've spoken with Benita Bolton as well as Edith in Wayne County. I can't remember her last name quite right now. So those are the two people from Laura I spoke with.
And what information do you remember sharing with Ms. Bolden?
Just that I kind of had concerns that these people were either told directly or their guardians were told that they were going to get a certain type of care, but then when people like me and Laura show up, they're being said that, oh, we're just renting these rooms. So there's some disparity there. I also noticed a pattern that they were being pulled out of their like regular health services, mental health services, and getting just to see this one doctor that comes to the house. So they're, you know, professionals were not getting eyes on them to really see what was going on with them. So that was my other concern.
That was a concern?
Yes.
And why is that a concern?
Because there was just nobody to check on them and really say, you know, obviously at least two of those residents I knew were deteriorating or having some higher needs, and there was no one that was addressing that.
With respect to APS's investigation, were you able to make a determination as to who was providing care for those 7 residents that you saw?
Well, to some level, I would assume that it was Jameson. There's one resident in the house that does a lot for the other residents in the house, and that's Gary. They have said Cecilia has shopped for them and done things for them as well. And then there's been sporadic, like, staff members, for lack of other words, that I've seen there, and I assume that they do things for them. I can't, a lot of times the residents don't know the names of the people, but they'll say, oh, you know, the staff that was here cooked for me or did something for me.
So when you were there in February, do you remember, were you greeted or did you talk to staff?
Yeah, so on my first visit, and I believe her name is Franca or something to that effect, Franca. She was there. The second time that I went, there was no one. The day that I petitioned, there was, on the 28th, there was no one there, but I talked to Jameson and he said that he couldn't get there. The general rule for the house is whoever the person is has to call Jameson before they let me in, or this most recent visit I went, I was told to call him. So there's like that, if there's no staff member, it's usually Gary that'll call him. So someone always kind of alerts that I'm there when I go.
Give me just a moment. That's all I have for you. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes. Ms. Davis, you had indicated that there were approximately, I believe it was 10 people in the home, is that correct?
There were 10 people that were technically living in the house when I began, yes.
Okay. And then you identified I believe 7 individuals that you actually talked to.
I believe it would be 8 total. On the first visit, 7, then I went back and I talked to Mary. By that time, Jesse, there was 2 other residents, Jesse and I can't remember this other woman's name, but I did see her as well. They were already in the process of being moved by a program called PACE. So PACE was getting them had already started moving them into the
And what I'm trying to get to is you were able to trace these 7 or 8 individuals to another adult foster care home?
Not all of them, but several of them previously did. Okay, so Phyllis was previously in a licensed AFC.
And if you could just stop there.
Sure.
If I'm reading your responses, Phyllis did not have a guardian, is that correct?
Phyllis does not have a guardian.
Okay, so she'd already been in adult foster care. Do you know what year that was?
No, I'm not positive of the year.
Okay, but regardless, she'd been in adult foster care, at least one that you're familiar with, correct?
Yes,
And no guardian had been assigned to her.
correct,
And she had previously been in a licensed adult foster care, correct?
correct.
So if there was no guardian to, I guess, make decisions for her, that decision was made by Phyllis?
I'm not positive, honestly. She did not know, or she wasn't able to give me an answer of how she got where she was.
Okay, but what I'm saying is this, did you ever speak to the previous adult foster care facility that she was at?
No, that Laura did that.
So she just poof, one day ended up at 1269 Michigan Avenue?
I'm not sure how she got there.
Okay, but when she got there, she had no guardian?
I would assume, I'm not positive because I don't know when she got there, but presently she does not have a guardian
When you
since
spoke-
I've been involved.
Right, when you spoke to her, she did not have a guardian?
When I spoke to her, she did not have a guardian.
Okay. And so, and you're familiar with the guardianship process, correct?
Yes.
And so normally individuals that are deemed incapacitated in some form or fashion, based on your understanding, are given guardians, is that correct?
You have to be deemed, to be given a guardian, a judge has to deem you incapacitated, but
Okay.
it doesn't necessarily mean.
I'm not asking you what it necessarily means, I'm just saying to get a guardian, you have to be deemed by a court to be incapacitated, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and at that point, Phyllis did not have one when you spoke to her?
When I spoke to her, she did
Okay.
not.
So then that's Phyllis, and now we get to, it appears you spoke with Barry,
I spoke with Barry, yes.
and Barry did not have a guardian.
Barry did not have a guardian.
And despite but Barry came from adult foster care, is that correct?
You know, I'm not positive that he did. We can never trace where he
So
was before.
you never knew whether or not he even came from adult foster care,
I'm not positive.
or how he got there?
I don't know.
Okay. And then we have Sherry, which was one that you said gave you some concern, correct?
Yeah.
And at the time though, Sherry, she came from adult foster care, correct?
No.
She did
She
not?
came from the hospital.
Right. Or you want to know what hospital?
I do, Garden City Hospital.
Garrison Hospital. But at that time you spoke to her, she did not have a guardian?
No.
So she was able to leave Garden City Hospital after being evaluated, or what was she there for?
Oh, it's kind of a difficult story, but I would just, a kind of mental health treatment.
Okay, so after she left Garden City Hospital, which based on what you just testified to was some mental health issue, correct?
Mhm.
they allowed her to walk out of that hospital with no guardian?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she was discharged with no guardian.
Okay. And do you know where she went after Garden City Hospital?
Yeah, she was, I use the word loosely, she was placed by the hospital at a home in Wayne that Jameson owns.
Okay, so there was a placement made. She was directed to go to.
Yeah.
Okay. There was another individual named Gary. Gary, he didn't have a guardian either, did he?
No.
Huh?
No.
Do you know whether Gary had come from an adult foster care facility or not?
My understanding is that back when Jameson and Cecilia had a license, he was with them. So that's just what I heard. But all he could say is that he'd been there in their houses for a very long time.
Right, but I mean, were you able to trace him to any adult foster care homes?
No, not other than the one that they used to own.
Okay, so no adult foster care home Gary came from and no guardian when you talked to him?
Correct.
Now, you said that Brandy had a guardian, is that correct?
Correct.
And so it was her guardian that made a decision that she should go to the Michigan Avenue?
She was already there.
Right, but what I'm saying is, so you're saying the guardian had no clue where the ward was at?
No. So her guardian is her mother. Her mother has always known that where she was. But at the time that her mother filed for guardianship of her, Brandy was already in another house owned by Jameson.
Right, but what I'm saying is this, so the guardian / mother knew where the child, her Brandy was at, correct?
At what time?
When you spoke to her?
Yes.
Yeah, she knew where she was at.
Yes.
And made no decision to remove her from that property.
Yeah, I would assume so.
There was no decision.
No, I'm not sure what her decision has been since then.
Well, she was residing there.
Yeah, she was living there.
Okay. And you're saying that the mother, the guardian, you learned that the guardian in this situation was under the impression that her daughter was at adult foster care?
She was under the impression that her daughter was being given full care and services, but later realized that wasn't the case because she was having to still do a lot for her daughter.
So the guardian was doing a lot for her daughter?
Yes.
Okay, and what was the guardian doing for her daughter?
Taking her to doctor's appointments, cooking her the food that she liked better than what was in the house, and, doing things that their mother would do because that's what her mother did.
Did you ever find out why the mother / guardian wouldn't have her daughter at her home?
Yes, just because of some history that they have. So Brandy has significant mental health issues, and she didn't think it would be a good place for her to be.
The next person I believe you referred to was John. John did not have a guardian when you spoke to him, correct?
No.
Did John come from an adult foster care?
I'm not sure where John came from. I couldn't trace it.
Okay. So at the time, and when I'm saying at the time, these individuals were at the 1269 East Michigan, and the individuals that besides Brandy, these other individuals that I just mentioned did not have a guardian at the time. John.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase your question? I was very
Okay,
confused.
I asked you about Barry, Sherry, Gary, Brandy, and John.
Correct.
The only one that had a guardian at that time when you spoke to him.
Of those groups,
Those people
Brandy.
was Brandy.
Yes.
The other ones did not.
That you just listed, correct.
Okay. And you don't know whether John had been in adult foster care previous to that or not?
I'm not sure.
I think another person was Phyllis. Phyllis did not have a guardian at that time, correct?
Yeah, I think you started with her. She did not.
No, I started with, right? Oh, I did start with Phyllis, you're right. So Phyllis did not have one. But Tyrone, you said he did have a guardian, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And what adult foster care did he come from?
He came from a home owned by Princess Kennedy, I believe.
That's not owned by Mr. Bonabuce, correct?
He was previously, yeah, no, that's not a home
Okay.
owned by.
And so, you're saying that a licensed adult foster care, facility, for an individual that had a guardian, who was Tyrone, it's your testimony that they placed him in an unlicensed facility?
No, they didn't. So the person that's the guardian for Tyrone is an agency called Guardian Associates, Inc. I might have those words mixed up somehow, but the case manager there explained to me that Tyrone's previous guardian was a relative who could no longer handle it. And so when they took over the case, Tyrone was placed at the adult foster care, and somehow it was suggested that he go to this East Michigan Avenue home. But
You suggest, but I'm saying ultimately those type of decisions are made by the guardian, correct? Where they're going to be placed.
so my understanding is kind of that the guardian was derelict and that Tyrone was sent without her knowledge to this place, and she just kind of let it ride. Is
Okay.
my impression of it.
Okay, that was your impression of it, but be that as it may, you're saying, is it your testimony that someone other than Tyrone made the decision for him to go to the Michigan Avenue address?
Yes. Someone took him there.
Now, you're not saying that every individual that has a guardian has to be in an adult foster care home, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You don't have to be.
Okay, it depends, because people have different varying degrees of need, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you're not saying that a person that has a guardian can't necessarily live in a room and board?
Yes, if that meets their needs, then that's fine.
And it appeared that there were two individuals that alarmed you, that was Sherry and John, is that correct?
Correct.
But those, at the time, those two individuals did not have a guardian, correct?
Correct.
So the fact that they were at that facility, and Sherry, we now know, was at Garden City Hospital and in some mental treatment facility there?
It's not a mental treatment facility. It's just the ER. The brief story is her and her sister had some sort of incident in which she had some sort of episode. She was taken to that hospital.
Right, but be that as it may, she was released, no petition was filed for her to be a guardian. And then the other individual that alarmed you was John, and he at the time had no guardian, is that correct?
Correct.
And you don't know, you were not able to trace John to how he got to the Michigan Avenue property, correct? Is that right?
That's correct.
Right, and so, and that, on top of that, so we don't know, neither one of those had guardians, but they ended up, it had to be at least to a certain degree, because they didn't have a guardian, John and Sherry's choice to move to Michigan Avenue address, because they didn't have nobody making any decisions for them.
Yeah, I'm not positive with John. Sherry literally just didn't have anywhere else to go. So.
Right, but let me put it this way. Sherry and John did not have anybody court order to direct them to a particular place to live.
No.
So if they had no one directing them, the alternative of that is they would have to have decided on their own.
I can't make that determination because I don't know what their state was when that happened. So I wouldn't have known if they were competent at that point to make that decision.
Do you know whether or not Sherry and John entered into leases with Chinook?
So I have seen some lease paperwork, but my concern with the leases is that I don't know how individually credible they are for this specific reason. So after I showed up on the 7th, Jameson came to my office and gave me lease paperwork for all of the residents.
You're not disputing that you were presented with lease papers, is that correct?
No.
And you're not disputing that there were payments made for
I
them to
was
reside?
told that they were being paid, yes.
Right, by the individuals?
Physically, no, he's the payee for several people, so he would be doing it himself.
So through your investigation, you determined that these individuals were paying,
Yes,
Jameson or Chinook?
yes.
Okay.
Can we go back? I'd like to hear you finish your thought about, you said you determined that the lease was not.
So the leases that were furnished to me, I looked at them individually.
Well, Judge, I don't mean to interrupt you with this. I really believe this could be a mischaracterization of evidence. There has been no evidence of any leases entered into evidence at this point, and for her to testify as to the validity of those leases, Your Honor, I believe is inappropriate.
Well, they don't have to be entered into evidence. She said that he gave her lease papers, so please finish your thought.
So, a lot of these people, they all are also on assistance with the Department of Human Services, so food assistance, Medicaid, Social Security, that type of thing. And so we have a system called Bridges where everything kind of gets uploaded, all the documents that prove that they qualify for those benefits. So I began comparing the leases that I was presented with the leases that were in the Bridges system. And there were different varying amounts of rent. At least 2 of the signatures were forged as told directly to me by.
To make a conclusion that documents were forged is not a handwriting.
They told me
expert.
though, so.
Look, we're getting into hearsay, Judge. I think we're really crossing the line here in terms of saying signatures were forged and that there was.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it. You compared them to the ones in Bridges, and there was inconsistencies?
And the dates, the signatures, and the amounts that were paid for rent.
Okay, thank you.
But let me go back to that just briefly on the judge. There were leases then, correct?
Yes.
And there were leases between these individuals and Chinook, correct?
Yes.
And that was for the rental of rooms, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, just so I'm clear, the individual that gave, or the 2 individuals that gave you the most alarm at the time you did your interview were Sherry and John?
Correct.
And neither one of them, at the time you spoke to them, had guardians?
Correct.
Okay. And so, is it uncommon for people that at some point their capacities change?
Yes.
So you could have an individual, for example, that walks out of Garden City Hospital and appears to be fine, correct?
Well, yeah.
Okay, and at some point, for example, Sherry, it appears that based on what you're testifying to, she was in Garden City Hospital for an incident that she had with her sister, is that correct?
After an incident. That's not why she was in the hospital, but it was after an incident with her.
It was a mental health issue, correct?
Yes, she
Okay.
was having mental health.
So she had some mental health issue at the Garden City Hospital that involved her sister, correct?
Yes.
She was, and I'm assuming, or you correct me wrong, was evaluated by medical staff at Garden City Hospital.
Yeah, I'm assuming. I wasn't involved at the time, but
Okay.
yeah, I would hope that they would do that.
And after that, she was released,
She was discharged.
discharged. And no one at Garden City Hospital, do you know when she was discharged?
Oh, man, in 2017, late sometime, I'm not positive exactly the date.
Oh, this was in 2017.
This was years ago, yes.
Oh, so we don't know really at what point, if any, so basically from 2017 to 2020, one of the persons that gave you the most alarm, Sherry, had been basically living on her own.
No,
Who was her guardian?
she didn't have a guardian, but
Right.
that doesn't mean she was living on her own.
In terms of living on her own, she was not deemed incapacitated by a court of law. From 2017, when the date the year you identified, into the February 2020 date, no court had deemed Sherry incapacitated.
Not that I'm aware of that.
Okay, and so she was making decisions for herself.
Yeah, she would have to.
Okay. And so, but when you came and encountered her at that moment in time, in February 7th of 2020, that's when you believed that Sherry was in need of guardian services, is that correct?
Yes, that was my first time.
That was the first
Seeing
time you seen her? Okay. But prior to that February 7th date, you have no idea.
I did not know she existed, so no, I never met her.
Right, I got you. And so, that same thing, John, you don't know, you can't trace him back to 2017, 2008, where he was at.
No, he's had home health services with us for a while, so my coworker who manages his home health case had been in contact with him, so I know that there was at least a year period prior to me being involved that he was with them at that
Oh, so he had contact with your office?
Someone else in my office.
Right,
yes.
but do you know what year that was?
Oh, it would have been throughout the past year, so
Okay.
she has to check in every certain.
So this individual at your office was having conversations with John?
Yeah, I couldn't speak to what that was like, but she was going out to do her home health assessment on
But let's put it this way. Based upon her time of dealing with her, there was no designation that she needed a guardian at that?
She wouldn't be able to make that determination. That's not her capacity.
Not the determination, but you would agree that if there was a concern, she would have brought it to the right person's attention?
And no,
You're
that's
saying,
not her capacity.
or you're saying that a person with adult protective services, if they see an individual that,
She doesn't work for Adult Protective Services
but how were you communicating with her?
because she works for the Department of Health and Human Services. So we have different programs in one building is the best way to describe it. So she works for another program.
Okay, I got you, but they're all under, isn't Adult Protective Services under the Department of Human Services?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that if a person in a Department of Human Services with the state of Michigan sees a vulnerable individual, they can just ignore that?
That's a very broad statement. It's not. I mean, if she felt that there was some sort of neglect, I would assume, yes, she's a mandated reporter. But I definitely know that she had expressed some concerns. I just don't know to what. You would have to talk to her. I don't know.
I got you, but at least to that point, whatever point that in time that the individual you're talking about, until the time you ran into John, he had not been given a guardian.
He had not been given a guardian. No.
Okay. And so, since that time, the individuals since the time that you left, I guess the last time was February 14th, those individuals have already been removed, correct? The individual that you had concerns about?
Sherry and John?
Yes.
Sherry is gone. John is not.
So John's still there?
John is still there.
Okay, but you did remove other individuals already?
So there were two, I personally wasn't involved in it, but there were two individuals right at the beginning that were moved into adult foster care homes.
And those two individuals were who?
Jesse and I'm really blanking on this young woman's name. I only met her that one time.
I guess the individuals that gave you the most concern are removed at this point.
No, John is still there.
So you would leave someone that's a vulnerable person with a guardian in a bad position?
I think leave is a bad term. Because of COVID, we've been restricted in what we can do with him.
Right, but you would agree that there's available.
There's not.
There's no available adult foster care?
No.
Every adult foster care in the
There is
Metro
no
Detroit?
available adult foster care homes to take John correctly right now because we don't have the type of evaluation on him that we need to determine that he gets in there. There's
When
no.
you say you don't have the proper evaluation, what do you mean?
So to be placed in adult foster care, there has to be his level of care has to be determined. A doctor has to do that. John doesn't have primary care. There's no primary
Oh, so
care.
you don't even know if John is in need of adult foster care services?
I don't have the medical documentation to say what he needs.
You don't know?
I'm not sure at this time. Yeah.
Okay. There was, and I'm just trying to clear this up, there was a testimony from Ms. Bolden, and you had indicated you spoke with Ms. Bolden. She indicated, and based on her report, and I'm referring to her report, March 18, 2020, she indicated that the individual that she first identified as Sherry, and who you've also identified as Sherry, the guardian for Sherry was Mr. Onabuche and Cece Onabuche.
I have never read her report, so I can't.
I'm just saying that there was testimony given. I'm just telling you, there was testimony given that that Sherry, the individual that's been identified as Sherry, the person you have the most concern about, that the guardian was Mr. Jameson Onabuche and Cece Onabuche. Based on your evaluation, that would be incorrect.
No, Sherry didn't have a guardian.
Right.
No, not
So
that.
there was no evidence, nothing whatsoever that would indicate that Jameson Onabuche or Cece Onabuche was Sherry's guardian.
Their legal guardian, yeah, no, I don't have any reason to believe that they
Right,
were
because
ever-
she didn't have it.
Not at the time that I became involved, no.
And that was after. Was that prior to or after? That was actually, did you interview her? Because Miss, when did you meet Sherry? On the 7th?
I first met Sherry on February 7th,
You
2020.
met her on February 7th, okay. And then you came back on the 14th.
Yes.
And at any point, did you see in a petition for guardianship by either Jameson or Cece Onabuche for Sherry?
Did I ever see a petition submitted by CC or Jameson for Sherry?
Right.
Is that what you're asking? No.
And so, do you know when a guardian was actually provided to Sherry?
I filed the guardianship petition.
And when did you do that?
I believe I originally filed sometime in March, but we didn't get a hearing because of COVID shutdown, so I don't think the guardianship was granted until April.
Oh, so not until April of 2020. So any indication that the Onabuches were a guardian for Sherry in February of 2020 would be inaccurate.
I don't have any reason to believe that.
Okay. Were you able to verify who, with the doctor's name that you said would appear or come visit the clients?
The doctor that I was informed, his name is Dr. Innocent Abbasi.
Okay. Did he, or are you aware of that doctor ever submitting any petitions for guardianship on behalf of the patient or the individuals that resided at the Michigan address?
No, a doctor wouldn't petition for guardianship, no. I don't know anything about that.
You don't have to be a certain individual. You have to be a certain type of individual to request guardianship or something?
Not necessarily.
Okay. No further questions.
Redirect, Ms. McLean?
Ms. Davis, can somebody still need supervision, care, around the clock and still not have a guardian?
Yes, it happens quite often.
I have nothing further.
Reed Cross?
No questions.
Thank you very much for coming in. Really took time. How many more witnesses do you have?
That is it, Your Honor.
Oh, okay. How many witnesses for you, Mr. Quinn?
I have one witness, Mr. Onabuche.
Okay. Then you're all set then, Ms. McLean.
Yes.
All right,
yes.
you may call your witness, Mr. Quinn.
Mr. Onabuche.
before you take your seat there, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Have a seat, please.
Please state your name for the record.
So my name is James Noyabuchi.
Okay, and are you familiar with the property at 1269 East Michigan Avenue?
Yes.
And what did you own that property?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm sorry, sir, could I get him to spell his last name, please?
It's in the case caption, Onyebuchi, right?
Yes, sir. It's ma'am.
Thank you.
And how long have you owned that property?
Since 2005.
Okay, and at that property, what did you use that property for?
For rental property.
And how long have you been using it for rental property?
Since I bought it, bought the home.
Since 2005?
Since I got it, yes.
Okay. Was there any designation that you sought for that particular property?
The rental certification approval.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Judge?
Yes.
Do you recall applying for a certificate of compliance for that rental unit?
Yes.
And do you, know whether or not that request for certificate of compliance was actually granted?
It was granted, it was approved 2018. It was current.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Could you please describe to me what I just handed to you? Could you please describe to me what I just handed to you?
This is a certificate of occupancy that was approved by East Planning Township for the property of 1269 East Michigan Avenue, March 29, 2018, which is current. And that document, certificate of occupancy and approval for rental property. That was issued on March 10, 2016, prior one and current one.
Now, at some point, you did used to operate licensed adult foster care services, is that correct? Facilities, correct?
Was 2003, 2004, but I wasn't the one that operated it.
From what years did you operate adult foster care facilities?
It was between 2003 and 2004.
Those 2 years?
Yes, initially, one of the homes was licensed, the Wyatt home,
Yes.
was licensed by Chuck
Yes.
Wiseman,
Yes.
and Chuck Wiseman revoked the license because he alleged that clients were left alone.
Okay.
So
And
he revoked the license and shut the home down.
okay. So after that point, did you continue the adult foster care services?
No,
What business did you get into?
room and board.
Okay. And were you aware of the order that was entered by this court as it relates to the property at 1269 East Michigan Avenue? The order regarding providing adult foster care services. Are you aware of that order?
Yes,
Okay. And what is your understanding of that order?
not to provide adult foster care.
Okay. And so you had previously provided adult foster care, you said 2003, 2004, correct?
Yes,
And so were you aware of the difference between what an adult foster care facility is and what a room and board is?
Yes,
Okay, just briefly, can you describe what your understanding of the difference is?
with adult foster care, you have to have staff. You have to provide care for the client's needs, have medication coordinator, have on-time staff, 24 hours staff, make their meals, provide their services, hire people to work.
Right. And so at the 1269, what is your understanding of a room and board?
My board is, I provide room and board for people that need a place to live and be able to provide them with some services, like helping them with a meal, helping them with their medication, which they take by themselves, helping them with their laundry, provide washer and dryer so they can do their laundry, provide them with entertainment, TV, provide them with bed where they sleep, and tenant appointment, to doctor's appointment.
Now, were you providing adult foster care services to the individuals at 1269 East Michigan in February of 2020?
No,
What type of services were you providing?
room and board.
Okay, is that why you had the rental unit certificate?
Yes, sir.
And that would be a fair and accurate depiction of that rental certificate?
Yes, sir.
I will move for admission as Exhibit C, Judge. I guess C and D.
C and D, any objection?
The only objection, Your Honor, would be relevancy, but other than that, I will stipulate to it. I just don't see how it's relevant.
Well, I think what you're saying maybe is that the court will give whatever weight the court determines it deserves, but exhibits C and D are admitted.
Okay, thank you. If I can just mark those. Give me the papers back. And so, with those individuals, did you provide room and board to individuals that you believe needed adult foster care services?
Say it again.
Did you provide room and board to individuals you believe needed adult foster care services?
Not knowingly. No, I did not. When they came to my home,
Yeah.
I don't know where they came from. They just called me and said they need somebody that needs to be, need a place to stay, because they were stranded, they were kicked out or something like that. Some of them from the hospital, from the emergency hospital, they called my business. And I say, yeah, I have accommodation. And I take them and they say, this room and board, I make sure that is room and board. Explain to the individuals that I come and they know where they're going, they know what they want.
So you would notify the referral source of exactly what type of business you were
Yes, sir.
prior to the individual coming there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so you were also, there was testimony about previous investigations conducted by Department of Human Services. You're aware of those investigations?
I wasn't aware.
You weren't aware of the January 8th investigation and the February 28th investigation?
I wasn't aware until I saw them in my property. They didn't tell me when they were, I saw them in my property. They didn't call me, they didn't schedule anything.
I get that, but you became aware that they were
Yes.
investigated, correct?
Yes, correct.
And so you knew that they were watching you for these so-called adult foster care services that you were
Yes, sir.
presenting. So did you ignore that, or were you cautious about the fact that they were trying to investigate you for those type of things?
I was cautious, that's why I'm not providing adult foster care, I'm providing room and board.
Okay, so it wasn't your intent to try, you had already been in communication with the state on numerous other properties you own, correct?
Yes, sir.
And discussed what was going on in those homes, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were open and honest with when I say the other investigation, there was exhibits that were presented and about the Weird property and the Cadillac property.
Yes, sir.
You were open and honest with the individuals
Yes, sir.
that you spoke with, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you operate the 1269 property any different, Michigan Avenue property any differently than the 1654 Weird or the 4154 Cadillac?
No, sir.
What were those properties? What kind of properties were those?
Those are room and board.
Okay, so basically, the Weird, Cadillac, and Michigan Avenue are room and board properties.
Yes, sir.
So this is not the first time you've told the state of Michigan
Not
that you operate room and board.
correct.
And this is not the first time that they've gone through your property to verify that, correct?
Correct.
And the correspondence you received on Weird and on Cadillac verified, at least said that you were not operating without a license, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so you were conscious of that? You were aware of that?
I'm conscious, I was aware of that, and I spoke with the licensing lady, Vanita about it, that I wasn't doing adult foster care, I was doing room and board.
Okay,
I get that, I told her, and I keep repeating that. I was approved for shelter provider, I was approved for home health provider.
I don't know what he's holding up, Judge.
With Washington County,
I'm not moving to move that as an exhibit.
Oh.
Okay, I'm not looking. But you're saying that you operated, you told the state of Michigan on more than one occasion that you operate a room and board.
yes, sir.
And you had conversations not only with Ms. Bolden, but with other individuals as part of the adult foster care investigation.
Correct, sir.
And your statements to them were consistent?
Was consistent.
Okay. And so, did you provide, I know there was talks about leases and things like that. Did you provide leases to Ms. Bolden?
No,
Who did you provide leases to?
to Oshana Davis.
Okay, and this was, were these leases for the property at Michigan Avenue?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and do you recall what the rental amounts were for each individual tenant, like Tyron Hester? Do you know how much he paid in rent?
Tyron pays $859
Okay.
every month.
Do you recall how much Phyllis Thomas paid?
Phyllis pays $800 something too.
Okay, so if I provide you with the lease, would it help refresh your recollection on what the rental amounts were?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, have you had a chance to review that?
Yes.
And could you identify what those documents are?
These are a rental agreement month to month
Okay, and for who, which tenants?
with Tyron,
Hold right there, how much did Tyron pay?
$850.
Okay, and how much, where did you receive, did Tyron pay you?
Yeah, he pays me through his guardian because when he came to my property, I didn't know he had a guardian from when he was, he came to my home, they called me, he needed a place to stay.
Right,
And I didn't have an idea he has a guardian until afterwards.
okay. Even though you knew he had a guardian, did you have any concerns about Tyron's ability to take care of his activities of daily living?
No,
Okay, and then who was the next lease with?
Phyllis Thomas,
Phyllis Thomas, and how much did she pay?
850, one lot.
Okay, and how did you get paid from Phyllis? How did you get paid?
I'm payee.
Okay, you're not a guardian.
I'm not a guardian, I'm a payee.
Okay, and so you had a discussion with Phyllis about how she was gonna pay you?
Yes, sir.
And you were, and based on that discussion, she made you her payee?
Yes, she went to Social Security and she admitted and agreed for me to be a payee.
And did you have any concerns about her, ability to handle activities of daily living?
No,
Okay. And who was the next lease with?
Sherry Teagan,
And, how did you receive payment from Sherry?
Sherry 900 a month.
Okay, and, where did you get the money from?
I was a payee also.
Okay, and that was a conversation that you and Sherry had about that?
Yes,
Okay, and did you have any concern about her handling her activities of daily living when she moved in?
no, she don't, but she needs a little help.
Okay,
Even though she's a little bit hallucinating and emotional
yeah.
due to what she went through with her sister
Mhm.
and the loss of her mom.
Okay,
So she was every time emotional about her loss.
okay. And so, who was the next lease with?
John Moore,
Oh, with who?
John Moore,
Okay, and how much did he pay?
800.
Okay, and how did you receive that money?
Then he's payee also.
Okay, and were you aware of John having any type of guardian?
No,
And based on your time with John, was he able to handle his activities of daily living?
yeah, he can handle himself. He go to the bathroom by himself. He dresses himself up. He eats by himself. He sometimes go outside and walk around in the yard.
Okay, and then who was the next lease with?
The next, Brandy Miracle,
Brandy who?
Miracle,
Okay, how much did she pay?
700.
And how did you get the rent money?
Formerly I was happy.
From her payee?
I was happy initially.
Okay, and
She
that
don't
was,
have to get it.
she did not have the guardian, and that was based on conversations you had with her?
Yes, sir.
Did you believe that Brandy was able to handle her activities of daily living?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Who was the next lease with?
We're only using first names.
Huh?
We're only using first names.
Oh, first name?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
All right. Next person is Barry.
Okay, and how did you come in contact with Barry?
Barry, I was called that Barry needed a place to stay.
You need a place to stay?
Yes, because he was kicked out or somehow he ended up in the hospital
Uh-huh,
and they called my business.
uh-huh,
And I asked if I have accommodation and I said I have accommodation.
okay,
Room and board. And it's stressed room and board.
okay. And how did Barry pay you?
$700 a month.
And how did you receive that money?
I'm his payee.
Okay, and was that based on a conversation that you had with Barry?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and was he able to take care of his activities of daily living?
He was there, yes,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Okay,
He can go to a gas station. He goes out whenever he wants. He goes to Speedway and buy beer. When they buy beer and drink beer, they're free to go out and do whatever they want to do on their own. They're independent.
And you had mentioned something about adult foster care providing 24-hour care. Were you even staffed or equipped to do something like that? Did you hire people to give 24-hour care?
Not this time around, but when he was at foster care, yeah, hired staff
But
there.
I'm saying this time,
No.
you did not have no 24-hour staff.
I'm not 24 hours staff. 24 hours staff.
Okay, and so basically, were these individuals free to come and go as they pleased?
Yes.
Okay, and they basically, what did you provide them with a place to stay?
Excuse me.
You provide them with a place to stay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so there was this testimony about the medications that were put and they were labeled. Why was that done?
To identify each individual,
Okay.
what their medications are,
But-
and to make sure it was not something they can get and take incidentally without giving rules or keeping their room or something.
But I'm saying-
Is in a certain place where they're all set to be there.
But was the separation of the drugs or the prescriptions and the placement of the drugs, the prescriptions, was that based upon communication with the individuals that had their
Yes.
prescriptions there?
Yes,
That was a conversation you had with them?
with the residents, yes.
And that was the understanding that is where their medications would be?
Yes, sir.
Did you lock that area?
No,
Did you lock the refrigerator?
no,
Okay, and so individuals could get access to their medications?
Yes.
And get access to food as they needed?
yes.
Okay, did you ever provide keys for the residents to come in and out of the property?
Yeah, when they sign a lease, I give them a key.
Okay,
When they sign an agreement, I give them the key. Maybe they lose the key, I don't know.
okay.
Yes.
I would just move, I guess, for the admission of the leases, Judge. I believe it would probably be, how many leases are there, Mr. Onabuche?
Excuse me?
How many leases do you have there?
Lease is about 9 or 10. I want to.
Do you want to put stickers on?
Yes.
This is 6 with this one. Should be 6.
6 leases.
6. The other guys are not there. The one that left, Anita, Oliver has not there. Jesse Williams, he's not there, by none of them.
I would mark these as
You left off with D, so E will be your next one.
E, F, G, H, I, and J.
Any objection?
I'd like to see them first.
I believe I'm fine.
Why is this so crazy?
Oh, that's great. You can ask them. There was a lease in here for Sherry. Why does that, it has a different address, why does that have the Grace address on there?
She lived at Grace initially when she came to me from Garden City. That was where she lived initially in 2017. But in 2019, she had an issue with a resident
Okay,
that lived there. They had a issue, so I had to separate them for a while to let things cool down, settle down. So I moved Sherry to Michigan Avenue, my home, the other property in Michigan Avenue, such that after things calm down, she would go back to 4347 Grace. And at the time, I traveled overseas and came back. So she remained at Michigan Avenue until Roshana Davis came for an investigation, which I didn't know where it came about. I didn't know what brought it about.
Right. But
No
did
idea.
you, but even though they came, this is like we had talked about before, they had previously,
Lived
no, but I'm saying, the department had previously, investigated you before with no issue, correct?
yes,
And so you didn't believe that you were doing anything different at Michigan, did you?
no,
Okay. So I'd still move for it to Michigan. So you never moved for another address, a new lease with Sherry. It just make the terms and conditions for Grace address applied to the Michigan address as well. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay. I just moved for the Michigan.
E through J, any objection?
No objection.
Exhibits E through J are admitted.
I have no further questions.
Cross?
Mr. Anabuchi, I noticed on the leases that were just admitted, they're all different amounts. It's not the same amount. Why is that?
Because depends on the need, what ability that I can provide to them. Some of them have much more issues. Processing their documents, like for food stamps, handling their daughter appointments. Some of them can take care of some things by themselves. So it depends. When I assess, see what kind of issue they have, what I can be able to do for them, then that's how I assess how much I'll charge.
So you are providing more than room and board?
It's room and board, not more than room and board.
You're aware of the permanent injunction order that was issued by this court in April 2017, correct?
Am I aware of that? Yes.
And just in general, that order was entered that prohibits you from providing or operating AFC at any location in the state of Michigan without a license, correct?
Correct.
Are you the guardian for anybody that's,
No,
why are you the payee if it's just a landlord-tenant relationship?
because the individuals came and they have some of them will not have a way to go to the bank and don't have account. And in order for them to pay their rent, to pay me, and they want me to be the guardian so I can be able to service them in that way. So they pay my company, and my company in turn give them the allowance that is due to them. And then the company gives their rent money from them. Otherwise, there's no way they can be able to pay.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Redirect, Mr. Quinn?
No, Judge.
Okay, thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you, ma'am.
And that was it for you, Mr. Quinn.
Yes, sir.
Any further witnesses for the Attorney General?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you want to make closing remarks?
If I may,
Yes, but let me check on one thing. You're good? Yes. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Mrs.
thank you, Your Honor. Basically, the issue here is not what Mr. Jameson thinks is adult foster care. It is the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, in this case, the Bureau of Community and Health Systems, that's charged under the law with making a determination as to whether or not there's adult foster care being provided. I think it's undisputed based on the fact witnesses that we've heard from today from Ms. Bolden, who is the investigator who conducted this investigation at a certain point in time, that she established that there was adult foster care being provided at the location at 1269 East Michigan Avenue. With respect to exhibits that the defendants provided as to other investigations, they're not relevant here because that's not what is supporting the motion for contempt. What was supporting the motion for contempt is Ms. Boland's investigation, which was Exhibit 1. Furthermore, we had the testimony of Ms. Davis, who provided the information about the residents that she found concerns of, that she has petitioned for guardianships, and or even if she hasn't, has concerns about their abilities. Mr. Anabuchi admitted that there are differences in these room and board agreements. They're not all the same because it depends on the services and level of care he's providing in terms of that. A typical landlord-tenant relationship too would not typically have a pay or a payee situation either. So all of this combined, I think that plaintiff has shown there's a preponderance of evidence of contempt. The reason this is so important is that there are residents that are still in this home, and there's also concern, even based on those lease agreements, one of which has the Grace property. That was the property that was the subject of the complaint for the permanent injunction back in 2017. These adults that are coming to these homes, and in particular the East Michigan Avenue home, are often individuals who need care, who have some vulnerabilities, whether it's physical, mental, cognitive. And that's why there's a license for those that want to provide adult foster care. If in fact this is how defendants wish to proceed to operate at 1269 East Michigan, they should apply for an adult foster care license. It's not a room and board, and I think that the evidence through the testimony and the exhibits that have been offered support that. I also just want to point out to the court's attention with exhibits C and D that were provided that are from Ypsilanti Township about rental unit compliance. Local municipal cities, villages, they make determinations in terms of rental. They do not determine whether adult foster care is being provided. And I would also like to note for the record that I see on Exhibit C, it says that this rental compliance expired on 3/10/2016. And Exhibit D, the rental unit compliance, it says expiration date 3/29/2018. So I'm not so sure that these are even in effect, but even if they were, that does not mean that adult foster care was not provided. We'd ask that the court find that defendants are in contempt of this court's order for the very reason that that order should be abided by. It's important, it's serious, we have the public to be concerned about, not just the residents there, but the potential of other residents coming. And just because somebody may refer somebody to this property doesn't mean that Mr. Anabuchi should accept them if they have needs that require more than just room and board. Thank you, Your Honor.
And as the relief, if you will, for contempt, you're asking for the maximum amount?
We would ask, well, we put that in there, we would ask the court to issue some type of fine so that this is taken seriously. There's concern that if it's been violated once, it could again. I'm also concerned based upon the fact that we have an exhibit that was introduced for a lease at the Grace property. So I don't know what's going on, but we want to make sure that these adults are protected and that we don't have situations where they could be in harm's way. It's also from the Department of Licensing's perspective, every time they go out, they have to conduct these investigations. It's time and expense, they will do it. But they also have a bunch of licensed AFC homes that they're out. So it takes them away from that as well. And since we have an order in this case that's pretty clear, we're just asking the court to enforce it and to make sure that defendants come into compliance and don't decide to defy the order, not just this time, but in the future.
There are 3 individually named defendants,
Yes.
and then the entity. Is the Attorney General requesting a sanction against each or collectively?
It could be collectively, it could be each. We will leave that to the court's discretion. Based upon the report that was prepared by Laura in this case, they determined that it was the defendants that were in violation. Jameson Onabuchi, Cecilia Onabuchi, and Chinook, which is an entity.
And I have another question.
Sure.
In your papers, you asked for attorney fees. Is there authority for that?
That would be just, Your Honor, based upon the fact that we had to come here today to, prepare all of this. I think the bigger concern and the bigger issue of what we're really looking for, Your Honor, is that there be some type of civil fine.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll hear from you, Mr. Quinn.
Yes, Judge, I would say that whether the court believes that individuals failed, it wasn't Mr. Onabuchi who failed these individuals. It was the very people that are trying to blame Mr. Onabuchi who failed this system. And the reason why I'm saying that, Judge, is that there was contact with these individuals. There were certain individuals that had been in contact with the Department of Human Resources. They had documentation on these individuals with the Department of Human Resources, and time again, these individuals were not petitioned for guardianship, or that was not their responsibility, or they were not supposed to do that. And now all of a sudden, Mr. Onabuchi, who is just trying to provide individuals that it appears the system allowed to fall through the cracks and wasn't focused on, to give them some place to stay, and the quality of that and whether how well that was maintained, that's each individual's own decision of how they want it. I'm not saying people need to live in bad environments, by no means, but obviously these individuals were almost, it seemed, shipped from place to place with no guidance, no assistance, although having direct contact and involvement with the Department of Human Services, and the Department of Human Services did nothing about it. They didn't petition guardianship. They didn't do anything about this. And now all of a sudden they want to point the finger and say, this is the bad guy. Judge, that's not the case. The system failed these people, not Mr. Onabuchi. Mr. Onabuchi is a businessman. He was trying to help individuals that were down on their luck. Some of these individuals, we don't know at what point they became potentially incapacitated because there was no court order in place to even make that determination. So you can't just say, to randomly say since 2017 an individual has been incapacitated, that's simply hard to believe, or it's not necessarily true. They've been living on their own, making decisions on their own for a period of time. And now at this point in time, it appears that those individuals may need some services and may need some help. But now to point the finger at Mr. Onabuchi and say, oh, you're the one that's doing this and you should have did this and you should know that. No, Mr. Onabuchi is a businessman. He understood, he testified, he understood this court's order. He respects this court, and it was in no way his intent or desire or anything to do anything but provide room and board to individuals that needed a place to stay. And that's it. That's it.
All right, thank you. Could you provide me with the admitted exhibits from both sides?
I don't know if the court's gonna give them back, but A and B I need back. Or copies.
I will eventually, but thank you, sir. Do you need a copy of when you leave here
A
today?
and B, Judge.
When you leave here today, you need a copy?
Yes, my client needs his copy.
Okay, all
Thank
right.
you, Judge.
And for the Attorney General?
Did you need a copy? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to evaluate the testimony and study the exhibits and take the matter under advisement. I'll be issuing a ruling very, very soon. It will be scheduled via Zoom because none of the issues that are present to having an evidentiary hearing are present just for me to come on and issue a ruling. So I will do that via Zoom. You'll get notification of the scheduling, and as I mentioned, it will be very expediently scheduled. And that is all for the record then today. And I am going to run and get copies made for you of these two exhibits, Mr. Quinn, before you leave here.